In that swift, unexpected recognition, Colwyn observed that the man for whom they had been searching looked pale and worn. He stood quite still in the doorway, his breath coming and going in quick gasps. "We have been looking for you, Captain Nepcote," Colwyn said. "I am aware of that. I have been waiting to see you, but I could get nobody to answer my ring. My man is out. You had better come upstairs to my rooms." He led the way to the lift at the end of the corridor. When they reached the rooms, Colwyn switched on the electric light. Nepcote dropped wearily into a chair, and for the first time Colwyn was able to see his face clearly. He looked very ill, there could be no doubt of that. His face was haggard and unshaven, his clothing was soiled, his attitude one of utter dejection. He crouched in the chair, breathing hurriedly, with one hand pressed to his right side, as though in pain. Occasionally he coughed, a short, high-pitched cough, which made him wince. "You had better drink this before you talk," Colwyn said. He handed him a glass of brandy and water. Nepcote seized it eagerly and gulped it down. "I've caught a bad chill," he said in a hoarse, unnatural voice. "I couldn't carry on any longer. That's why I came to see you tonight. But I'd given up hopes. I was ringing for some time." "You came to surrender yourself?" "Yes, I am fed up absolutely. I was a fool to bolt. I've had a horrible time, sleeping out of doors and in verminous lodging houses, with the police after me at every turn. I stuck it as long as I could, but today I was ill, and when I saw a policeman watching the lodging house where I meant to sleep tonight, I felt that I had to give in." "Why have you come to me instead of going to the police?" "I thought I would get more consideration from you. I know you are searching for Mrs. Herodotus' necklace. Here it is." He drew from his pocket a small parcel wrapped in dirty tissue paper, and put it on the table. The untidy folds fell apart, exposing the missing necklace, but the diamond was missing from the antique clasp. "The diamond is in that," he said, placing a small cardboard box beside the pearls. "I wish I had never seen the cursed thing." "How do you come to have Mrs. Herodotus' necklace?" Nepcote hesitated before replying. "I was terribly upset by Mrs. Herodotus' death," he said at length. "I knew her before she married Phil Herodotus. We were old friends." The inconsequence of this statement convinced Colwyn that he was seeking time to frame an evasive answer. "If that is all you have to say, it is useless to prolong this interview," he coldly remarked. I am going to tell you where I got the necklace," Nepcote said, with downcast eyes. "Mrs. Herodotus gave it to me." "Why did Mrs. Herodotus give you her necklace?" "She asked me to raise some money on it for her." "For what purpose?" "I cannot say. Pretty women always need money. It may have been for dress, or bridge, or old debts. She brought me the necklace one day, and asked me to get some money on it. I suggested that she should apply to her husband, but she said she needed some extra money, and she did not wish him to know." "And you complied with her request?" "I did, after she had pressed me several times. I am always a fool where women are concerned. I promised to raise money on the necklace in London for her. That was the beginning of my troubles. But who could have foreseen? How was I to know what was going to happen?" He sat brooding for a space with gloomy eyes, like a man repelled by the menace of events, then burst out wildly. "I'm in a horrible position. Who will believe me? My God, what a fool I've been!" You are doing yourself no good by going on like this, Colwyn said. You are keeping something back. My advice to you is to be quite frank with me and tell me everything. You must give me a few minutes first to think it over, responded Nepcote. He cast a doubtful glance at the detective, and relapsed into another brooding silence. Before you say anything more, it is my duty to inform you of my own connection with the case, said Colwyn. There has been an arrest for the murder, as no doubt you are aware, but the family are not satisfied that the right person has been arrested. You are suspected. Do they think that I murdered Violet? Oh, I never dreamt of this, he added, as Colwyn remained silent. I thought that you and the police were searching for me because of the necklace. It is even worse than I thought. I will now tell you all. Perhaps you will then help me, for I am innocent. Until that moment he had flung out his protestations with an excited impetuosity which told of a mind suffering under a grievous burden, though it was impossible to determine whether that state of feeling arose from anxiety or conscious guilt. His quietness now was in the oddest contrast. It was as though he had been sobered by his realization of the difficulty of convincing an outsider of his innocence of a foul crime in which he was deeply entangled by an appalling web of circumstance. He began by explaining, vaguely enough, his past friendship with the murdered girl. He had first met her in London 2 years before. Their relations, as he depicted them, conveyed a common story of a casual acquaintance developed in the familiar atmosphere of secluded restaurants, with dances and theaters later on. His story of this phase had all the familiar elements which make up the setting of a modern sophisticated love episode, into which a man and a girl enter with their eyes open. In the masculine way, Nepcote refrained from saying anything which could hurt the dead girl's reputation, but it was his reticence and reservations which completed the story for his listener. He said that their flirtation ceased when Violet became engaged to Philip Herodotus. On his own showing he then acted sensibly enough in a delicate situation, and was afterwards reluctant to accept the invitation to the moat house. With one of his reticent evasions he slurred over his reason for changing his mind, but Colwyn guessed that it was due to the feminine disinclination to bury an old romance. Violet had probably written and asked him to come. He conveyed to Colwyn a picture of the state of things existing at the moat house when he arrived. It was an unconscious revelation on his part of a giddy shallow girl hastily marrying a wealthy young man for his money, quickly bored by the dull decorum of English country life, sighing for her former existence, for the gay distractions of her irresponsible London days. It seemed that in this frame of mind she welcomed Nepcote as a dear link with the past, and sought his society with a frequency which had its embarrassments. Of course there was nothing in it, Nepcote was fiercely insistent on that, she was bored, poor girl, and liked to talk about old times with her old friend, but it was awkward, devilish awkward, in a country house full of idle people and curious servants with nothing to do but use their eyes. She had taken him aside to tell him of her little troubles. Miss Herodotus did not think her good enough for Phil, she was sure she thought that. They had the vicar and old frumps in to tea, and she had to listen to their piffle. They all went to bed soon after 10, just when people were beginning to wake up in London and go out for the night. And she had to go to church on Sunday because it was expected of her. Did he ever hear of such rot, and so on? It seemed that everything in her life bored her. Of course Phil worshipped her, but that didn't help her much. How could it, Nepcote asked, fixing his burning glance on his listener, when she had only married him for his coin? It appeared he had given her such counsel as his worldly experience suggested. He told her to get Phil to take her up to London now and again for a change. He advised her to stand no nonsense from anybody, pointing out to her that she was the future Lady Herodotus, and, within limits, could do practically what she liked. These intimate details of the confidences between them brought Nepcote to the vital point of his possession of the necklace. He now admitted that his former story was untrue. The actual truth was that he had needed some money badly for his gambling debts. He told Violet of his position, and asked her had she any money to lend him. She had not, and rather than ask Phil, she had, for old friendship's sake, offered him her necklace to raise money on, or to sell outright the diamond in the clasp. He accepted her offer, and went up to London on the following day to try and sell the diamond. Wendover's card had been given to him by a brother officer in France as that of a man who gave a good price for jewels without asking too many questions. But the diamond merchant had not lived up to his reputation. He had refused to look at the diamond. He had been horribly rude, treating him as though he was a pickpocket, and had practically ordered him out of his office. In fact, his whole attitude was so suspicious that Nepcote decided it would be better to leave his gambling debts owing than run the risk of trying to raise money on a married woman's jewels. He returned to the moat house, leaving the necklace locked in his desk at his flat. At this point Nepcote ceased speaking again, interrupted by a paroxysm of coughing, and when it passed his eyes turned towards the window, as though he were listening to the gentle patter of rain on the panes. For a space the two men sat with no sound in the room except Nepcote's labored breathing. When he did resume he spoke with a quickened emphasis, like a man aware that he was entering upon the part of his narrative most incredible of belief. "It happened 3 nights later," he said. "I was in my room writing some letters before retiring, when I heard a light and hurried tap at my door. When I opened it, Violet was standing there. She stepped quickly inside. Before I could express my opinion of her reckless foolishness, she burst into passionate sobs and reproaches. It was all my fault, that was the burden of her reproach between her sobs. It was some time before I could get out of her what was wrong. Then she told me that Sir Philip had asked her to wear the necklace at some dance we were to attend on the next night. It was then that I learnt that the necklace had been given to Violet by Sir Philip as a wedding present. Violet attached such little value to the gift that she had given the necklace to me, thinking it would not be missed, but she had found out her mistake that night. It was in the presence of Phil and Miss Herodotus that Sir Philip had asked her to wear it. Violet tried to get out of it by saying that the pearls were dull and the necklace wanted resetting. On hearing this, Miss Herodotus had gone out of the room and returned with Mr. Musard, an old family friend who had arrived that day on a short visit. He is a connoisseur in jewels, and Miss Herodotus asked his advice about the necklace. Musard told her that the pearls had long needed some treatment technically known as skinning, and he offered to take the necklace to London 2 days later and get it done by an expert. Violet accepted the offer, and then promised Sir Philip that she would wear the necklace at the party. She slipped upstairs to see me as soon as she dared. She was greatly relieved when she learnt that I had not parted with the necklace, and she wanted me to go up to London and bring it back so that she could wear it to the party. I was willing to do so, but I doubted whether I would be able to get back in time. The local train service had been restricted on account of the war, and the only train I could catch back did not reach Herodotus until 7:30. It was Violet who hit on the plan. The big thing, the vital thing for her, she pointed out, was to have the necklace in time to give to Musard before he went to London. She said she could easily get out of going to the dance by pretending to have one of her bad headaches, and she did not wish to meet Mrs. Wayne again. Her idea was that I should pretend I had been recalled to France, delay my departure until the afternoon train to prevent suspicion, and return secretly with the necklace. She said that the afternoon train reached London at 5:25, which would give me 35 minutes to take a taxi to my flat, get the necklace, and catch the return express at 6 o'clock. I was to leave the train at Weydene Junction, where nobody was likely to recognize me, and walk across country to the moat house. She expected that by the time I reached the house the others would have left for the Waynes, so the coast would be clear. I was to enter the house by a little unused door at the back of the left wing which she would leave unlocked for me, and wait at the foot of the staircase until she came down. I did not like this plan because of the risk, but Violet grew almost hysterical when I objected to it. She said there was no danger, and it was her only chance of safety. She believed that Phil suspected something, because he had looked at her strangely when they were talking about the necklace downstairs. I put that down to nervousness on her part, but I realized she must have the necklace, so I gave in, and said I would do as she wished. I have since bitterly regretted that I did not go openly to London and back, even at the risk of a little idle curiosity. I announced my recall and departure next morning at the breakfast table, and returned to London by the afternoon train. I drove to Sherryman Street, got the necklace, and returned to Victoria just in time to catch the 6 o'clock express. I left the train at Weydene, and walked across the fields to the moat house. It was quite dark when I reached there. I crossed the back bridge over the moat and went to the door in the left wing, as we had arranged. To my surprise, it was locked. I waited outside the door expecting Violet to come down. Everything was silent, so I thought the others must have started for the dance. But the time went on, and nobody came. Then I decided to creep round the side of the wing and see if there was a light in Violet's bedroom. At that moment I heard a loud scream from somewhere upstairs, followed by a deafening report. I had no idea what had happened, but I knew that I must not be found there, so I slipped back the way I had come. I ran along the outside of the moat wall, making for the wood in front of the house. As I passed Violet's window I looked up, and it was in darkness. I suppose that was why I did not connect the shot or the scream with her. I plunged through the woods till I came to the carriage drive. From there the front of the moat house was visible to me. I could see lights flashing, and people moving hurriedly about. After I had stood there for some time I saw a man hurrying across the moat house bridge in my direction, so I went back into the wood and hid behind a tree. The man stopped as he walked along the carriage drive, and looked towards the tree where I was crouching. He called out who was there. I recognized his voice. It was Tufnell, the butler. I thought I was discovered, and crept into some undergrowth, but in a moment he walked on. I remained hidden in the undergrowth for some time, an hour or more. Once I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel path, then all was silent again. After waiting for some time longer I decided to walk back to Weydene and return to London. But I made such a wide detour for fear of being seen that I lost my way, and it was nearly midnight when I found myself at Rainchester, on the main line, just in time to catch the last train to London. It was a terrible shock to me when I opened my paper the next morning and read about poor Violet's murder. I had never thought of anything like that. At first I could think of nothing but her terrible end, but then it occurred to me that my own position would be awkward if the loss of the necklace was discovered. As the papers said nothing about the necklace I concluded that it had not been missed. But I knew the police would be searching for clues, and might discover the loss at any moment. I knew it was dangerous for me to keep it in my possession, so I decided to get rid of it without delay. I thought at first of returning it anonymously, but I immediately abandoned that idea as too dangerous. Then I thought of dropping it into the river. It occurred to me, however, that if by any chance the police discovered that the necklace had been given to me, and I couldn't produce it if I were questioned, I should be in a worse fix still. So I tried to think of a safe hiding place where I could lay my hands on it in case of necessity. I could think of none. Time went on, and before I had decided what to do with the thing my man came along and said it was time to catch the boat train. So in the end I put the necklace into my pocket and took it to France with me. It seemed as safe there as anywhere else for the time being. I was only going to the base, so I saw the London papers every day. I was very relieved when I read of the arrest of Hazel Rath for the murder. I returned to London feeling reasonably safe, though it seemed strange to me that the loss of the necklace had not been discovered. I thought everything was found out when you and that Scotland Yard detective visited my flat. But Merrington seemed to have no suspicions of me, and I was just beginning to think I was finally safe when he remarked that the police knew of the missing necklace. I started, and that gave me away to you, at all events. I saw you glance at Wendover's card as it fell on the table, and I knew that you suspected me. After you had both left I had a bad half hour. I could see I was in a dangerous fix. You were aware of the address of the diamond merchant to whom I had gone, and who, no doubt, would be able to identify me. I had made my own position worse by lying about the War Office telegram, as could easily be proved. There was also the possibility that the police might find out about my return to Herodotus on the night of the murder. I did not then see what all these facts portended for me, though I do now. But I feared arrest for the theft of the necklace, with the alternatives of imprisonment if I kept silent, or facing a horrible scandal if I told the truth. I was not prepared for either. I slept at an hotel that night because I feared arrest, but next morning, early, I returned to the flat to exchange my khaki for a civilian suit. After thinking over things during the night, I had come to the conclusion that I had most to fear from you, and I decided to watch you. If you did not visit Wendover's place during the day, it seemed to me that I might be alarming myself needlessly. You know what happened. I bolted when I saw you emerge from the buildings, and wandered about for hours, not knowing what was best to do. When I discovered that I had no money, nothing in my pockets except that cursed necklace, which I had taken with me because I knew the flat would be searched, I decided to return to the flat for the money I had left behind in my other clothes. I was too late. When I reached Sherryman Street, I saw two men watching the flat from the garden of the square opposite, and I knew I would be arrested if I went inside. What's the use of talking about what followed? I hadn't the ghost of a show from the start. Do you think you know anything about London? Believe me, you don't until you have been cast adrift in it with empty pockets. It's a city of vampires and stony hearts, a seething inhuman hell where you can wander till you drop and die without anyone giving a pitying glance, much less a helping hand. Even a man's guardian angel deserts him. It doesn't take a man very long to get to the gutter, to fall lower and lower until there's nothing but the Thames embankment or the mortuary in front of him. I've had my eyes opened, I've talked to some of these poor devils in this Christian city. But what's the good of telling you this? I've been down to the gutter myself the last few days, falling each day to lower depths, tramping hungry and footsore in the midst of herds of respectable human brutes, slinking away from the eye of every policeman, pawning clothes for the price of a verminous bed, to lie awake all night knowing that I would be murdered by the vulture-faced degenerates sleeping in the same hovel if they had caught a glimpse of the necklace. How many wild schemes have I planned in the night for raising money on the necklace in the morning? Once I went into a pawn shop, but the pawnbroker's eyes glittered when I spoke of pearls, and I got away as quickly as I could. I suppose there was a reward, and he was on the lookout for me. One way and another I have been through hell. I feel like a man in a fever. I was drenched through yesterday, and I've had no food for 24 hours. He ceased, and sat staring into vacancy as though he were again passing through the horror of his wanderings. Then another fit of coughing seized him, prolonged and violent. When it had subsided, he looked at Colwyn with bloodshot eyes. "I feel pretty bad," he said weakly. That fact had been apparent to the detective for some time past. Nepcote's frequent fits of coughing and a peculiar nasal intensity of utterance suggested symptoms of pneumonia. As Colwyn lifted the telephone receiver to summon a doctor, the thought occurred to him that, if the immediate problem of the disposal of Nepcote had been settled by his illness, his inability to answer questions necessitated his own return to the moat house without delay. In any case, that course was inevitable after what he had just heard. It was only at the place where the murder had been committed that he could hope to judge between the probabilities of Nepcote's strange story and Hazel Rath's confession. It was there, unless he was very much mistaken, that the final solution of the Herodotus mystery must be sought.